I parked my car 3 blocks away. Not because I couldn't find closer parking. I could have. The garage right next to the building had a full level free. But I needed those 3 blocks. I needed to walk past the coffee cart where I used to stop every morning for 6 years. Past the dry cleaner where Mr. Ossie still had my name on a ticket I never picked up. Past the corner where I used to stand waiting for the light and mentally rehearse the day ahead. I needed to feel all of it before I walked through those doors. The building looked different at night. They'd installed new lighting along the entrance, warm amber strips that made the glass facade glow like something out of a magazine spread. Someone had approved that renovation. Someone had signed off on the aesthetic direction, the contractor, the budget. That someone used to be me. I stood on the opposite sidewalk and looked up at the sign. Harlow Adaptive Systems. My last name. My father's last name. The name I'd fought to put on that sign when my uncle kept pushing for something more neutral, more corporate. I was 24 when I won that argument. I remember thinking it meant something, that they were proud enough of what I'd built to put the family name on it. I was wrong about a lot of things at 24. Let me tell you how this started. Not the official version. Not the one my father told investors. Not the one my older brother rehearsed for the business press. The real one. My name is Calla Harlow. I'm 31 years old, and I built a prosthetic limb calibration system that changed how amputees interact with neural interface devices. That's the technical way to say it. The human way to say it is, I spent 7 years writing code that helps people feel their artificial hands again. I wrote the first version in my childhood bedroom, on a laptop held together with a rubber band, while my father sat downstairs watching football and my brother played Xbox in the room next to mine. Nobody asked me to do it. Nobody funded it. Nobody believed it was worth funding. Not at first. My mother had passed when I was 19. She'd lost her right arm in an accident when I was 12, and watching her struggle with every prosthetic interface she tried, watching the frustration on her face when the feedback lag made her feel like a stranger in her own body. That was what started everything. I wasn't trying to build a company. I was trying to build something she would have deserved. She died before I finished it. That's the part I don't say in interviews. My father, Owen Harlow, remarried 2 years later. His new wife, my stepmother, was pleasant in the way that expensive furniture is pleasant. Decorative, impractical, and cold to the touch. My older brother, from my father's side, had never been particularly cruel to me. He was something worse, indifferent. He treated my work like a hobby, the way you might be politely interested in a cousin's watercolor paintings. When the system actually worked, when the first clinical trial showed a 73% improvement in feedback response time, my father suddenly became very interested. He came to my apartment. He sat across from me at my kitchen table. He brought a bottle of wine, which he'd never done before, and he talked about legacy and family and what your mother would have wanted. He said he wanted to support me. He said he wanted to support me. He said he wanted to help me scale this. I should have asked more questions. I should have had a lawyer in that room. Instead, I poured the wine and I listened. The arrangement he proposed was simple on the surface. I would develop the technology. He would provide operational structure, the business filings, the office space, the staff, the fundraising connections he had through 30 years in medical device sales. He said he knew everyone. He said he could open doors I'd never reach alone. In exchange, we'd split equity, 60% for me, 40% for him and my brother combined. I asked about IP ownership. He waved his hand. It's a family company, Calla. The IP belongs to the company. We're all the company. I was 24. I'd never incorporated anything. I didn't know what I didn't know. My brother was brought in as chief operating officer. He had a business degree and a golf handicap and approximately zero understanding of neural calibration systems. But he was good at shaking hands and sounding confident in rooms full of people who rewarded confidence over competence. I told myself that was useful. I told myself we each had our role. His role, it turned out, was to slowly make me feel like I was working for him. It started small. He'd CC himself onto investor emails without telling me, then answer questions that were addressed to me. He'd introduce himself at conferences as the architect of the Harlow platform while I stood next to him. He'd take calls in my office and gesture for me to leave. Once I heard him explain our core algorithm to a potential partner and get 3 fundamental things wrong, but he said it with such certainty that the partner nodded along. I corrected him afterward. He smiled at me like I was a child who'd interrupted an adult conversation. They don't need the technical details, Calla. They need to feel confident. That's what I give them. I brought it up with my father. He said I was being oversensitive. He said my brother was doing his job. He said, "You focus on the technology. Let us handle the rest." I told myself that was okay. I had 60%. I owned the majority. If things went wrong, I had the votes. I was wrong about that too. Year 3. My father restructured the ownership without telling me. Not dramatically. Not in a way that would have set off obvious alarms. He did it through a series of small amendments, a reallocation here, a board vote there, things buried in documents that were emailed to me late on Friday afternoons, with notes saying, "Routine filing, sign here." I trusted him. I signed. By the time I understood what had happened, my 60% had become 31. My brother held 24. My father held the rest, structured through a holding company I hadn't known existed. I found out because our accountant, a woman named Patricia who had worked with my mother's estate and felt she owed me some loyalty, slid a folder across her desk one afternoon and said, quietly, "I think you should look at this before the board meeting next week." I sat in her office for 4 hours. I called no one. I just read. The board meeting was about a potential acquisition. A German medical technology corporation called Veltman AG had made an offer. The number was $940 million. My father and brother had been in talks with them for 8 months. I had not been in any of those talks. I want to tell you, I walked into that board meeting and flipped the table. I want to tell you I had a lawyer on speed dial and a brilliant countermove ready. I didn't. I walked in and I sat down and I listened to my father present the acquisition terms like he was doing me a favor. "This is a generational opportunity," he said. "Veltman has the distribution network to get this technology into every major hospital system in Europe and North America. We'd be doing real good. Your mother would have—" "Don't," I said. He paused. The room went quiet. "Don't use her," I said. "Not for this." He recovered quickly. He always recovered quickly. The terms he presented, I would receive a buyout payment based on my current equity stake, 31% of the sale price, minus fees, minus what he called operational debt attributed to my department. My brother would remain with the company post-acquisition in a senior leadership role. I would be offered a 12-month consulting contract, after which my employment would end. I would not have a role at Veltman. I would not have a seat at the table. "You're selling my life's work," I said, "and you're paying me a consultant's exit package." My father looked at me with something that might have been regret if I'd been willing to be generous. "You'll be financially set, Calla? You can start something new." My brother didn't even look up from his phone. I voted against the acquisition. My vote didn't matter. The weeks after that meeting were the worst of my life in a specific, quiet way. Not dramatic, just the slow, grinding feeling of watching something you built get packed into someone else's boxes. Veltman's integration team arrived. They were efficient and polite and completely uninterested in me. My brother walked them through the system like he'd written it himself. I sat in my office and updated documentation that no one asked me to update because I needed to feel useful, because I didn't know what else to do. I was given a move-out date. My office, my equipment, my access credentials. 3 days before my last day, my father came to my office. He sat down. He told me he was proud of what I'd built. He told me this was the right decision for the company, for the technology, for the family. "You keep saying family," I said, "but you made this decision for 8 months without me. You would have said no." "Yes," I said, "I would have." He stood up. He smoothed his jacket. "You'll understand someday," he said. "When you have children, when you understand what it means to make decisions for people who can't see the full picture." He left. I sat very still for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and I started checking something I should have checked 3 years earlier. My core algorithm, the original calibration engine, the thing that made Harlow Adaptive Systems worth $940 million, I'd written it before the company existed. I'd written it in my bedroom, on my own equipment, before my father ever sat across from me with his bottle of wine. I had never formally assigned that IP to the company. I know what you're thinking. How could that have been missed? How could Veltman's legal team, my father's lawyers, 8 months of acquisition negotiations have missed that? Because my father assumed the same way he'd assumed everything about me for 30 years, that I would comply, that I would be grateful, that I understood my role. He never checked because it never occurred to him that I would have anything he needed to check for. And there was something else. 2 years into the company, I had quietly registered a provisional patent on the calibration methodology under my name. Not the company's name, mine. My father had been in the room for that conversation with the patent attorney. I remember it clearly. But he'd been on his phone, and he'd waved his hand when I asked if he wanted to review the filing. "Do what you need to do," he'd said. I did what I needed to do. I spent 3 days with an IP attorney named Gareth Moss, who had an office above a sandwich shop in Midtown and a reputation for being very good at situations like mine. He reviewed everything: the original code commits with timestamps, the provisional patent, the employment agreements I'd signed, the ownership restructuring documents. He looked up at me over his reading glasses. "Do you understand what you have here?" he said. "I'm starting to," I said. Veltman's official acquisition celebration was scheduled for a Thursday evening at the Meridian Hotel, a private event, investors and board members only. The announcement would go public the following morning. My father had been very specific that I was not on the guest list. I found out about the event because Patricia, the accountant, texted me a photo of the invitation that had been sent to her firm. No message, just the photo. Some people say what they need to say without words. I didn't go to the event. I didn't need to. What I did was send a certified letter delivered by a process server at 6:47 p.m. that evening to Veltman AG's lead counsel, my father's attorney, and the escrow agent handling the acquisition funds. The letter was from Gareth Moss, on behalf of Calla Harlow, asserting IP ownership of the core calibration methodology underlying the Harlow Adaptive System platform and requesting an immediate injunction on the finalization of any transfer of that technology, pending resolution of ownership claims. The letter also noted that any platform built on this methodology, including all current deployments, all clinical integrations, all licensed hospital systems, would require a separate licensing agreement with the actual IP owner to continue operating legally. I was at home when it was delivered. I was eating takeout pad thai on my couch. I had the news on in the background. My cat, a gray tabby I'd adopted during the first lockdown, was asleep on my feet. My phone started ringing at 7:02 p.m. I didn't answer. The thing about having leverage is that you don't have to perform it. You don't have to be in the room. You don't have to see anyone's face. You just have to make sure the right documents are in the right hands at the right time, and then you let reality do its work. I learned that from 7 years of debugging. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a broken system is introduce the correct variable and step back. My father called 11 times that night. My brother called twice, which, honestly, told me everything about how much he actually understood about the situation. My stepmother sent a text that said, "Calla, please, this is not the time for this." I added her to the Do Not Disturb list. Gareth called at 8:15 to give me an update. Veltman's legal team had halted the escrow. The party at the Meridian had apparently ended very abruptly. When as the Veltman executives had walked out while my father was mid-sentence, my brother had tried to explain to the room that this was a misunderstanding, that it would be resolved quickly, that the IP situation was straightforward. "Is it straightforward?" someone had reportedly asked. My brother had said yes. He'd said it with the same confidence he used when he explained the algorithm wrong to partners. It had worked about as well. The next 6 weeks were not simple. I want to be honest about that. There was litigation, or the threat of it. My father hired aggressive counsel and made noise about breach of fiduciary duty, about the nature of IP created during employment, about implied assignment clauses. Gareth was not rattled. He'd seen these arguments before. The provisional patent held. The timestamp evidence held. The fact that the core code predated the company's incorporation by 14 months held. What broke my father's case, ultimately, was a document he'd signed 3 years earlier. When he'd restructured my equity without telling me, he'd needed to recharacterize the nature of my contribution to justify the reallocation internally. His attorney had written a memo, intended as internal only, that described my role as independent contractor and technical founder rather than employee. He'd signed it. He'd thought it protected him from certain employment claims. It protected me instead. Feltman came to me directly in week 4. Without my father. Without my brother. They sent their chief technology officer and their head of legal, and they met me and Gareth in a conference room that Gareth booked specifically because it was not impressive. A plain room, no view, bad coffee. Gareth said that was intentional. He said you never want the other party to feel comfortable. Their CTO, a serious woman who spoke with a faint Austrian accent and looked like she had not slept properly since the letter arrived, asked me what I wanted. I had prepared for this question for 3 weeks. I told her. I wanted a licensing agreement for the core IP under terms I set. I wanted a technical advisory seat on the Veltman Integration Board for a period of no less than 3 years. I wanted my name in the public documentation as the original inventor. Not the company, not my father, me. And I wanted the acquisition to proceed only on those terms. She asked if there was a number she could counter with. Gareth slid a sheet across the table. The licensing fee was structured as a percentage of revenue generated through the platform, ongoing for the life of the patent. She looked at the sheet for a long time. "This is not a one-time payment," she said. "No," I said. "It's not." She looked at me. "Your father described you as a technical resource," she said. "He said you weren't interested in the business side." "My father," I said, "has been wrong about me for a long time." The agreement was finalized on a Tuesday. Gareth called me before the ink was dry. He said he'd been practicing IP law for 22 years, and this was in his top 5 outcomes. I told him that was a strange compliment. He said, "Take it anyway." I went for a walk after I hung up, just around my neighborhood. The same streets I'd walked the night of the Meridian event, the same coffee cart, the same dry cleaner. I picked up the dry cleaning I'd been ignoring for 8 months. Mr. O.C. behind the counter handed me my blazer and said, "Long time." I said yes. He didn't ask about it. Some people are very good that way. My father called me for the first time in 6 weeks, 2 days after the agreement was signed. He'd heard from his attorney. He knew it was done. He didn't apologize. I want to be clear about that. What he said was, "I hope you know what you've done to this family." I thought about that sentence for a moment. "I know exactly what I've done," I said. "You've made enemies of the people who supported you." "You restructured my ownership shares without telling me," I said. "You planned a $940 million sale for 8 months without including me. You took me off the guest list for the celebration of my own company. I didn't make enemies, Dad. I just stopped pretending they were friends." He hung up. My stepmother sent another text 3 days later asking if I'd consider a family dinner to clear the air. I read it twice. I typed and deleted several responses. Finally, I put my phone face down on the counter and went back to the code I'd been working on. Early sketches for something new, something entirely mine. Something with my name on the filing and my name only from day 1. I didn't answer her. My brother reached out once. A voice message, which surprised me. He'd always been a texter. He sounded tired. He said he wanted me to know he'd respected what I built. He said he was sorry things ended the way they did. He said he hoped we could have a relationship outside of all the business stuff. I listened to the message twice. I don't think he's a bad person. I think he's someone who was handed things his whole life and genuinely never understood why that was a problem. I think he stood in rooms and took credit and smiled and thought that was just how things worked. That the people who could articulate something deserved the credit, regardless of who had done the actual work. I haven't called him back. Maybe I will someday. I haven't decided. My mother would have had a complicated opinion about all of this. She was a forgiving person. Genuinely, not performatively. She believed in family in a way that wasn't transactional. But she also used to say something that I've thought about a lot these past months. You can love someone and still refuse to let them diminish you. She said it about a difficult friendship she'd had in her 20s, but I've applied it in a lot of directions since. The Harlow adaptive system is still running. Veltman launched their first European deployment 6 weeks after we signed. I saw the press release. They used my name in the second paragraph, inventor of the core technology, which was part of the agreement. It was strange to read. Not bad strange, just strange, the way it feels when something you've held privately for a long time finally becomes visible to other people. I have a new project now. I'm 3 months into it. I have a small team. 2 engineers I recruited myself. Both women. Both told me within the first week that they'd left previous positions because they'd been overlooked. I told them the only hierarchy in our office is based on who has the deepest understanding of what we're building. So far, it's one of the engineers, not me. And I told her that directly and publicly and watched her stand a little taller for the rest of that afternoon. I still walk past the Harlow Adaptive Systems building sometimes. I don't know why. It's not on the way to anything. I think I need to see it. I think I need to confirm that it still exists, that it still works, that the thing I spent 7 years building is real and running in the world, even though my name has been removed from the lobby directory. The technology is real. The impact is real. My mother's name is in the dedication section of the original patent filing. A small personal addition Gareth said was non-standard but legally harmless. I insisted. He let it through. That part they couldn't take. I'm not angry anymore. I want to say that carefully, because I don't mean it the way people mean it when they want you to think they've transcended everything cleanly. I mean it more specifically. I'm not stuck in the anger anymore. It still visits. It visits when I'm tired, when I pass a certain conference room, when I see my brother quoted in a trade publication talking about his time at Harlow. The anger comes. I let it arrive and I let it leave. What stays underneath it is something harder to name, something closer to clarity, the knowledge that I know exactly who I am and what I'm capable of, independent of whether anyone in my family ever acknowledged it. That knowledge is mine. No filing can transfer it. No restructuring can dilute it. No sale at any price removes it. I own it completely. I always did. Where are you watching from? And I want to ask you something real. Has anyone ever taken something you built, your work, your idea, your time, and put their name on it? If you felt that, I see you. Leave it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you're in the middle of something like this right now, if you're sitting in your car 3 blocks away from the building you built, trying to find the courage to figure out what comes next, I want you to know something. Check the paperwork. All of it. Go back to the beginning. You might own more than they told you. I've thought about cause and effect a lot since all of this happened. Not in a cosmic way. I'm not someone who believes the universe was arranging things on my behalf. I mean it in a simpler, more mechanical sense. Every action in this story created the exact conditions for what came next, and nobody understood that better than I eventually did. My father spent 30 years believing that confidence was the same thing as competence. He watched my brother walk into rooms and command attention and mistook that for capability. He watched me sit quietly and write code and mistook that for passivity. Those 2 misreadings were the foundation of every decision he made, and they were also, ultimately, his undoing. What I keep coming back to is this. He never asked to read the patent filing. He was in the room. He was physically present at the meeting with the attorney. He chose his phone over the document in front of him, and that choice, That single, small act of not paying attention is what unraveled $940 million worth of assumptions. Nobody sabotaged him. He just stopped paying attention to the person actually doing the work, and eventually the work reminded him she existed. That's not luck, that's consequence. I think about Calla, about myself at 24, sitting across from my father at that kitchen table, wanting so badly to believe that his interest in what I built meant he respected what I'd built. Those are not the same thing. People can want what you've created without valuing who you are. Learning to tell the difference between those two things is maybe the most important skill I've developed, and I wish I'd learned it a decade earlier. I had to develop it the hard way, through years of watching my own name disappear from things I'd made with my own hands. The intelligence it took to build the system, I had that at 22. The wisdom to protect it, to understand that goodwill is not a legal document, to know that love from someone does not automatically mean safety from them. That took longer. I don't think you can rush that kind of learning. You earn it through the specific pain of finding out. And the resilience. That was the last thing to arrive. Not the dramatic kind, not the kind that looks good in a story. The quiet kind. The kind that looks like sitting in an IP attorney's office above a sandwich shop and reading the same clause 17 times until you understand exactly what it means. The kind that looks like not answering 11 phone calls in one night. The kind that looks like going to pick up your dry cleaning the next morning and just living your life. I don't tell this story to make my father a villain. He made choices, and the choices had outcomes, and the outcomes were fair. That's all. I tell it because I think a lot of people are sitting somewhere right now in the middle of something similar, not necessarily a company, maybe just a project, a contribution, a piece of themselves they handed to someone who took it without acknowledgement. And I want them to know, go back to the beginning, read the documents, ask the questions you didn't ask the first time. What belongs to you has a way of staying yours if you're willing to look.